Hi, this is Andreas Antonopoulos of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Today I have Chris Ellis of Feathercoin on the show, and we'll be talking about Bitcoin and philosophy. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
I really enjoyed our discussion the other day, and I wanted to expand a bit on it because, as you know, part of my heritage is Greek, and that doesn't give me any particular insight into Greek philosophy. But I certainly understand some of the motivations behind the Greek philosophy because it's still embedded in our Greek culture. I really enjoyed hearing you talk about philosophy, and I think we share a common understanding of the need for forming a narrative and creating the right circumstances around Bitcoin. But before we get to that, let's take a step back. Why philosophy and Bitcoin?
Well, there is no understanding Bitcoin without the philosophy. And so we should probably start off with why philosophy, right? And this is the question a lot of people get. But philosophy is, and I might get into a lot of trouble for saying this because anyone who tries to define it usually does, but it's the what is question. It questions previous assumptions and things that we thought we knew to be true. And it's actually more a way of being. It gives us a way of dealing with the unknown and the unknowable. Is what it does is builds a self-knowledge. How do I understand myself in relation to the environment? Because if I understand myself, then it really doesn't matter where I am or when I am. Then I will have the framework I need and a template and a set of tools with critical thinking and so on about how to deal with it and how I can learn. Because if I don't know anything about my environment and I don't know anything about myself, that's usually not good news.
So it's about learning more so than it is about having knowledge. It's about the process of acquiring knowledge and relating to the environment, right?
You've got it. And if we want to be very particular, we could say it's about taking data, turning it into information, turning information into knowledge, and then turning that knowledge into self-knowledge, wisdom. Philo, love, and Sophia, wisdom. And so you have the love of wisdom. It's a movement. It's a moving. Saying that you're going to philosopher, I make no claims to being a philosopher. I'm very insecure about my knowledge. I describe myself as a thinker. I like talking to people about difficult issues, about hard issues, about issues they probably only think about when they're, on a train and looking out the window, but not the kinds of things they would ever think about at work. And thinking about things with no expectation of return. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to get out of this because ultimately thinking results in failure. The risk you're taking with philosophy is you don't know what it's going to produce. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. Sometimes the thought will just stop very abruptly and it will make you feel very silly, particularly if you're giving a voice to it to other people. Sometimes it will just keep going on and on and on. The thought will just take you to all kinds of places and you'll run out of energy.
Thinking itself is modeling the world. And in doing so, you're taking something that has infinite complexity and infinite depth and trying to map it into a finite model that can fit inside your head and thinking patterns. So by its very definition, this is a lossy process. And when you take, say, 3 dimensions and you map them to 2, you lose something in the process. So by the very definition, if you try to create an abstract model of the world, you have to remove most of it in order to understand it, even a tiny bit. I find it funny that you say you're insecure about calling yourself a philosopher because that's actually very characteristic of people who are thinkers, is that they're unsure. Certainty comes mostly from ignorance, I would say, rather than from knowledge. Knowledge makes you extremely insecure because the more you learn, the more you know you don't know.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. It's actually quite like being an athlete in a way. It's like saying you're going to do athletics, education of the body. That's how I'm understanding it. And it's like, well, what kind of athlete? You could be a runner, you could be a rower, you could be a swimmer. You can get your philosophy from literature, from art, from film. I mean, pretty much anywhere. You can get it from idle talk, just everyday sort of water cooler type conversations. The problem is it's kind of impoverished when you take it down to the level of what Heidegger will call, the inauthentic mode. This is existentialism. You're just kind of going around your life. You're not really thinking about what you're doing. You're just kind of getting on with the day to day. It's all about what they say. What did they say on the news? And you reduce everything to this kind of, just average everydayness. And you still get that little voice in your head that says, you're wasting your life. You're wasting your life, and it's there and it's calling you. But you're just completely blind to it. And you just get washed away by the general consensus, by just the general will, as Rousseau called it. And also, I feel it's apt to sort of say, because I haven't said this before in any of the times where we've met on the Bitcoin group and stuff, I am heavily influenced by people like Robert Harrison at KZSU, Stanford professor, hugely influential, Corey Anton, and the guys at Partially Examined Life as well. So when I talk, I just want to put that in there so that anyone listening to me, if they want to learn more, they want to see where my thoughts have come from. Those three places in particular have been very, very influential on me.
There's something about being able to go out there and talk with people about things that really matter and have meaningful conversations that I find tremendously rewarding. And I think that's where knowledge comes from. It comes from testing your assumptions and asking tough questions and being asked tough questions. I find one of the most rewarding parts of my job in Bitcoin is the ability to meet with members of the community on a very regular basis and get essentially a free ride along with their community and learn from what they're doing in Bitcoin. And through that process, I can develop all of the ideas that I then take public and talk about in the various shows I do. But really, it's not about me coming up in ideas alone in a room. It's about having conversations every single day. And these conversations yank me out of any possibility of getting lost in the mundane, because my thinking is challenged every single day that way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what I say to people is, if you're smarter than most of your friends, you've got the wrong friends, and you need to move into new circles and people who can test you, not test you so much that you end up feeling terrible about yourself. I'm not saying you should go join CERN or something if you're not good enough at the physics, but you should definitely subject yourself to critical thinkers who can challenge you in new ways.
There's a whole world out there, and it's full of conventional wisdom, and it's full of ideas that we take for granted. And if you peek just below the surface, most of the most commonly held beliefs in our world are fundamentally untrue. That's what really fascinates me, is that the things that the vast majority of people believe in are probably the least true things out there.
Well, that's because, we only get to truth through time. And so, for example, let's take notion of a king and a sovereign, right? A king actually at the beginning of the reign is a rebel. He starts life as a usurper, but ends life as a kind of overweight, obese, kind of, luxuriating in all his glory, that the throne gets too comfortable and he doesn't want to lose his power anymore. And so then you need to have a new king. Now, from our perspective, looking back, it looks like a king is just incumbent. It looks like, well, this is normal. And why challenge it? But now we're starting to see with the introduction of coin, I don't know about you, or I do actually, I think I heard you say you when you first read the paper, you couldn't eat, you couldn't sleep, had exactly the same reaction. I still don't eat. I still only eat once or twice a day because eating interrupts my thinking. And so I want to keep thinking. So I don't eat. I just drink coffee and just read and read and read. And this whole community really is divisive, the Bitcoin community, okay? Because it divides the curious from the incurious. There are people that are turning around and learning about this interesting new phenomena. Then there are people that are just staring at two-dimensional shadows on the wall, claiming knowledge about the three-dimensional objects they're meant to represent. And you can't understand the complexity and the richness, as you alluded to earlier, of a three-dimensional object by staring at the price, for example. That's the common one. And it's not to say that the price doesn't matter. It's still an aspect. It's just not the most important one. And it falls into a myriad, and it makes up just one part of a very complex picture. And so I quite like it that it's the whole community kind of brings me together with people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. Had Bitcoin not existed, I wouldn't have met all these great people that I come across. I mean, obviously you and this show has been great because, I regularly go and contact the people that have appeared on the show or look into their work. We met somebody the other day at CoinFest in Vancouver, Crypto Youth. Nathan and Karina have started up this amazing project to take the proceeds of Bitcoin mining and various cryptocurrency mining and give it to children that are disadvantaged, children at risk, to help pay for scholarships. And this is fantastic. So when, these self-proclaimed experts talk about the bubble, I think, okay, but all I've listened to is a bunch of non sequiturs. It's not that you're wrong. It's just that you're missing the point. You're not right either. And what you're doing is you're approaching this new object and you're just saying, well, I already know what it is. And I expect it to come ready made as well. That's the other thing. It's a real kind of laziness to the thinking. Like it should just have everything built in straight away for me, ready to go. But then other people are more generative. They come to it and they say, well, isn't that interesting? And I wonder what I can learn about this, or I wonder what the possibilities are for this. What could this do for people? What do you mean I can transmit economic value at the world at a distance, at near instantaneous speed and at no cost? It just mind boggles, but at least it helps us to identify the good from the bad, because that's what money is. Money brings together the honest, the dishonest, the criminals and the police. It brings together everybody in a place, and you don't leave until you know why. And I think the people that are approaching this new way of being, I would say it's a new way of acting, because it's not just about the money. It's also about the work, which we should investigate a little bit. And if you think, when people say intrinsic value, they're really saying, I don't find what supports commodity to be valuable to me. It's not important to me. That's a better way of saying it. It's not important to me.
Well, it's fundamentally misunderstanding the thing for the symbol, which is an ancient philosophical question. Intrinsic value assumes that there is a thing behind the symbol, and money in itself is really not just a symbol. It's a language for communicating value between people. Money is not just symbolic in the very basic sense. It's a full symbology of value, and it's used to communicate value in an abstract language for which there is no thing behind it. And that effort to find the intrinsic value is almost like the effort to find the Platonic ideal shape that exists to give the abstraction reality, right? That somehow the abstraction only works if there is something behind it to give it value. And we know that that's not the case. We know through repeated application and through history that the symbols and languages emerge and they serve purposes regardless of intrinsic value. Intrinsic value in itself is almost an oxymoron, because value is an assigned abstraction and therefore cannot be intrinsic. Value is assigned on a context-by-context basis, on a moment-by-moment basis. Here in the US, we take even simple things that should have intrinsic value. Water, which is life-giving. And you live in a society where water is mostly abundant, and you put it in a fountain and you throw money in it. There was a cartoon I saw on Reddit. On Twitter, somebody tweeted this photo of an African child looking up at a Western journalist, and the caption was, "So what you're trying to tell me is that you pee in a bowl of clean water," and that's unthinkable, because there is no clean water in many places in the world. But, what is the intrinsic value of water? The intrinsic value of water is infinite when you're thirsty, and almost zero when you're not, when it's abundant, which means it's not intrinsic. It's something that's assigned to us purely based on the context, based on how scarce it is, based on our needs, based on our environment, based on our future expectations of its availability. I got into deep trouble over saying that even money, even food and water doesn't have intrinsic value if it is abundant. If it is abundant, and that's the key phrase, of course, there. And even that, because, probably that has the most intrinsic value because it is life-sustaining. And even that has very little intrinsic value. Not zero, but almost no value when it's abundant. So all of these concepts of intrinsic value represent a fundamental misunderstanding of money. And that's what I find fascinating, is that when you talk to people about Bitcoin, you quickly realize that, at least like me, they really didn't understand money until they started asking the tough questions. One of the things that Bitcoin is doing is it's starting, or cryptocurrencies in general, is starting a conversation about what is money and forcing us to skip the easy questions, or rather skip the easy answers. It forces us to skip the easy answers because it violates the easy answers. And so we find that the easy answers themselves were just a mirage. So what is money? Something that has intrinsic value? Well, not really. And something that can be used to exchange value? Not always. All of the easy answers kind of go out the window, and then you're forced to confront the fact that money is in fact a cultural phenomenon, a language, an abstraction that's much, much more complex than we realize. It's not just pieces of green fabric with lots of germs on them that people exchange as if they mean something.
Well, the intrinsic value is there, but it's there because everyone agrees it's there. It's a consensus. So it is. You're absolutely right. Everything you say is absolutely right. I think what people are longing for is a permanent store of value. And the problem is that time is always going to humiliate us. It's always going to come up with something new, something unanticipatable. And it's going to show us as false. It's going to say, this was never valuable. Did you not realize? So I think we're the ones putting the value in there, are we not?
Yes. If anything, the one true thing in the universe is entropy. A permanent store of value would be a non-entropic object, an object that is not affected by entropy, that lives outside of space-time, an object that cannot be corrupted, a Platonic ideal. And that's really what we're looking at. Again, it's this idea that if only you had this perfect object that was incorruptible, that was never depleting, that was always useful, and in a way that never changed in its usefulness, then that would have intrinsic value. But that assumes a world that doesn't exist, a world that doesn't have change. And change is the only thing that exists. And it exists.
That's right.
Abundance.
Change, and also the rate of change. I mean, one of the things that's different now, any other point of history, is that we have such a big picture. We can see further back into time and space. We have this, what sociologists call this ambient sociality, where the whole world is just distanced to me. Like I am so close and yet so far away from a lot of people in the world. And what it does is it makes us responsible. It makes us responsible because now we have the ability to respond. I can now do something to help that person that was a victim of that tsunami. And there's no excuse. I'm running out of excuses, even to myself, even if there's nobody there to witness me watching the story unfold on the news, which I'm getting in real time from many angles. And I'm having all kinds of experts on meteorology tell me all about these kinds of weather patterns and the impact that they can have. And even if there's nobody there to see, I'm still ashamed if I don't send the money. I'm still I've got a miniature version of society in my head that says, but do this. Do you really need that money? And I think what's happening to a lot of people at the moment is, demand for money is sky high right now because people, I think of another way of thinking about money is as a sort of a liquid or a sort of kind of water. It can kind of move, but it can also freeze. And people, I think that just want money for the sake of wanting money are just waiting to be born. It's the sum total mass of all of your prior economic energy comes together and manifests as one block, one sort of entity in your world that you can then distribute. The word currency, I think John Locke applied it as he applied it, was currents. So it means not just to flow, but it also means extend the present. Money also gives you an extension. Rather than just hankering after more and more and more of it, you should actually think more about what you do with it now. What is your net present value? And we've said this before when we've spoken, and maybe we should say it again, that the reason we got into this financial mess in the first place is because the people got lazy and they outsourced wealth management to a bunch of people who then ended up forming an industry that had huge net present value. They had the money now. And that's all that really mattered. And so they went off, they formed gambling addictions. They started, betting, taking all these crazy bets. And meanwhile, people let them. And we see the numbers on the screen. This time, those shadows don't really represent what's behind there because they're just pixels. They tell you have £8,000 in your bank, but do you? Well, no, because if everybody turned up tomorrow and tried to claim it, that money wouldn't be there.
This is Chris Joseph bringing you news on Next, the first true second-generation cryptocurrency for April 16th, 2014. Several new code features have been included in the newest version of the Next testnet software. These include the Next Digital Goods Store, which is a decentralized market for the sale of digital files, and effective leasing, a form of pool where you lease the mining power of your stake without actually sending anyone your coins. These features are as yet untested and still need APIs written, so if they sound exciting to you and you're a Java coding wizard, we could use you. The new software also includes code for canonical signatures, a method for eliminating the transaction malleability problem, which was pitched by community members as designed through forum discussions. For more general information on Next or to get involved, head to nextforum.org and check out the Next newsletter on nxter.org. And of course, stay tuned for more news on Next on the next Let's Talk Bitcoin broadcast.